Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The grandfather clock in the corner of Jason's living room struck 7, each chime echoing through the dimly lit space like a countdown to disaster. He sat in his leather armchair, a wedding gift they'd picked out together, and stared at the half-empty whiskey glass in his hand, watching the amber liquid catch the light from the antique floor lamp. The expensive crystal tumbler distorted his reflection, fracturing his image just as thoroughly as his marriage had splintered over the past few months. Upstairs, Melissa's preparations for the evening continued, each sound a fresh wound. The soft thud of dresser drawers opening and closing, the whir of her hairdryer, the click of her heels against the hardwood floors they'd installed together last spring, back when he still believed in their future. Now those same floors carried the echoes of her deception through their two-story colonial home. Jason took another sip of whiskey, letting the burns settle in his throat. Their wedding photo still hung on the wall across from him, a reminder of happier times that now felt like a cruel joke. In the image, they beamed at each other under a flower-covered arch, her white dress gleaming in the June sunlight, his tuxedo perfectly pressed. 5 years of marriage captured in a single frozen moment of joy, now tainted by the knowledge of what was to come, that he remembered that day with painful clarity. The way Melissa had teared up during their vows, promising to love and cherish him forever. The way she'd looked at him during their first dance, like he was her entire world. Now those same eyes held only cold indifference. When they bothered to look at him at all, the stairs creaked under Melissa's weight, and Jason's grip tightened around his glass. The familiar scent of her new perfume, Chanel, if he wasn't mistaken, far more expensive than anything she'd worn before, reached him before she did. The fragrance had first appeared 3 months ago, around the same time the late-night work calls had started. He didn't need to look up to know she'd be wearing something new, something that wasn't meant for his eyes. "Don't wait up," Melissa called out, her voice carrying that artificial lightness she'd adopted lately, the tone that suggested nothing was wrong even as their marriage crumbled around them. The sound of her rummaging through her purse echoed in the tense silence, the designer clutch he'd never seen before today. Jason finally turned his head, the movement deliberate and controlled. She stood by the entryway mirror, applying a final coat of deep red lipstick MAC. Ruby Woo, he noted absently, the shade she'd started wearing to important meetings. The black dress she wore clung to her body like a second skin, the hemline riding high enough to make his jaw clench. The material looked expensive, new. Another hidden purchase, another secret to add to the growing pile. Her blonde hair fell in perfectly styled waves, too perfect for what was supposed to be a casual holiday party. She'd spent 2 hours in the bathroom getting ready, longer than she'd spent preparing for their last anniversary dinner. That evening had been rushed, her mind clearly elsewhere as she picked at her food and checked her phone every few minutes. "Mark's party, right?" he asked, his voice rougher than intended, the name tasting like acid on his tongue. "Your boss's Christmas gathering?" Melissa's hand paused, her lipstick hovering near her mouth. Their eyes met in the mirror's reflection, and for a moment he caught a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, or fear before her practiced mask slid back into place. "Yes," she answered, a slight edge creeping into her tone. "We've been over this, have we?" Jason set his glass down on the side table with deliberate care, the soft clink of crystal against wood punctuating his words. "Because I don't remember discussing why my wife is going to her boss's party without her husband. On Christmas Eve, no less." He watched her reflection, noting the way her shoulders tensed, the slight tightening around her eyes. Small tells he'd learned to read over their years together, now serving as evidence of her deceit. "Oh, please." Melissa rolled her eyes, dropping the lipstick into her clutch with a sharp snap. The gesture was dismissive, practiced a move she'd perfected over the past few months. "It's a work thing. You'd be bored to tears. Just executives and account managers talking business strategy." "Funny." Jason stood, his movements measured, controlled. The whiskey in his system burned, but his mind remained crystal clear. Because Tom from accounting mentioned there wasn't any office party tonight. In fact, he said Mark's throwing a private gathering. Very exclusive. Strange that my wife's boss would host a party without inviting any other executives. Even stranger that his own wife won't be there. Color rose in Melissa's cheeks, staining her carefully applied foundation, but her chin lifted defiantly. The diamond earrings he'd given her last Christmas caught the light, sparkling accusingly. Are you spying on me now? Having your friends track my movements? I shouldn't have to. The words came out like gravel. He took a step forward, watching as she instinctively shifted away from him. A wife shouldn't lie to her husband about where she's going, who she's with, what she's doing on Christmas Eve instead of being home with her family. Don't start this again. Melissa turned away from the mirror, her heels clicking against the floor as she headed for the door. Each step echoed with finality. I'm not doing this tonight. I have obligations, responsibilities. Just because you want to sit at home and sulk doesn't mean I have to. If you walk out that door, Jason said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, don't bother coming back. I mean it, Melissa. She froze, her hand on the doorknob. The grandfather clock ticked away precious seconds, each one feeling like a nail in their marriage's coffin. When she turned, her face had transformed into a mask of contempt, all pretense of civility stripped away. Who the fuck are you to tell me what to do? The words shot out like poisoned darts, meant to wound. I'm a free woman. I can do whatever I want whenever I want. You're not my keeper, Jason. A free woman? Jason's laugh held no humor, the sound echoing off the walls like broken glass. Is that what you call sneaking around behind my back? Those late-night work calls that take you to the other room? The mysterious lunch meetings that run for hours? He moved closer, watching her grip tighten on her purse. The shopping trips that somehow never produce any bags? The receipts you think I haven't found? You're paranoid. But her eyes flickered away, a tell she'd never been able to master. Her fingers drummed against her clutch, another sign of her discomfort that she couldn't hide. I have a career, Jason. I'm not going to apologize for being successful. Some of us actually want to move up in life instead of staying comfortable in mediocrity. The jab stung, but Jason refused to let it show. He'd recently made partner at his law firm, an achievement she'd barely acknowledged, too busy with her own networking events to attend the celebration dinner. Success doesn't require lying, he countered, his tone leveled despite the rage building in his chest. It doesn't need secret phone calls or hidden text messages. He pulled out his phone, watching her face carefully. It doesn't explain why Mark's wife called me last week, asking if you and I were having problems. Apparently, she's noticed how close you and her husband have become. The long office hours, the private meetings, the way you lean in when he speaks. Melissa's face paled slightly before anger flooded back in, her cheeks flushing with both rage and what might have been embarrassment. You're pathetic. Sitting here, drinking alone, spinning conspiracy theories because you can't handle that I'm not some housewife who needs your permission to live her life. What's next? Going to hire a private investigator to follow me around? Little did she know he already had. The manila envelope in his desk drawer held enough photos to destroy her carefully constructed facade. But that revelation could wait. He had plans for those pictures. Permission? The word tasted bitter on his tongue. I never asked you to be anything but honest. To honor the vows we made. Remember those, Melissa? To love, honor, and cherish. Or were those just words to you? Vows. She laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. Wake up, Jason. This isn't the 1950s. Marriage doesn't mean ownership. It doesn't mean I have to check with you before attending a work event. No, but it should mean respect. He gestured to her outfit, taking in every detail that screamed of her deception. That dress isn't for a work party. That makeup isn't for networking. You're not even trying to hide it anymore? Are you? Just like you're not trying to hide the hotel charges on our joint credit card. Her eyes widened fractionally, another tell. She hadn't known he'd found those receipts. I don't have to explain myself to you. Melissa yanked the door open, the December wind rushing in and carrying snowflakes with it. The cold air matched the ice in her voice. You want to sit here and play detective? Fine. But I'm done with this interrogation. I'm done with your suspicions and your accusations. Melissa, his voice carried a warning she'd never heard before, deeper and darker than any tone he'd used in their 5 years of marriage. You walk out now, we're done. No more lies. No more chances. No more pretending we both don't know what's really going on. She paused in the doorway, snowflakes beginning to drift onto the threshold and melting in her perfectly styled hair. For a heartbeat, something flickered across her face, doubt, perhaps, or a glimmer of their shared past. A reminder of who they'd been before the lies had poisoned everything. Then her features hardened into carved ice, any trace of the woman he'd married vanishing behind a wall of defensive anger. "Fuck you, Jason," she spat, each word dripping with venom. "You don't get to threaten me. I'll do what I want, when I want, with whoever I want. And if you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine." The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the wedding photo on the wall. Jason watched through the window as she climbed into her car, the luxury sedan he'd helped her pick out last spring, back when he still trusted her excitement about work events. She didn't bother brushing the snow from her hair or waiting for the engine to warm up. The red taillights disappeared into the darkness, leaving him alone with the wreckage of his marriage for a long moment. He stood motionless in the silent house, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. Then, with mechanical precision, he began to move. Each step was purposeful, driven by a cold clarity that cut through the whiskey's haze. First stop, his home office. The space that had once been their shared study now served as his war room. He settled behind the mahogany desk, another wedding gift, this one from his parents, and opened his laptop. The screen cast a blue glow over his features as he logged into her forgotten email account that she'd slipped up 2 months ago, leaving herself logged in on their shared computer. Instead of logging out, he'd made note of her password. It had proven to be an enlightening decision. Messages from Mark filled the screen. Declarations of love tucked between business discussions, detailed plans for their rendezvous hidden in meeting requests, pictures that made his stomach turn. The latest email had arrived just hours ago. "Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. With that black dress I bought you. You know the one. This party is our chance to finally stop hiding." Jason's jaw clenched as he printed every damning message, every intimate exchange. The printer hummed in the corner, spitting out page after page of betrayal in crisp black and white. Next came the financial evidence. In the kitchen, he retrieved the stack of receipts she'd failed to hide completely. Expensive restaurants on days she'd claimed to be working late. Hotel charges that coincided with her business trips. A jewelry store receipt for a woman's bracelet he'd never seen her wear dated just after his last business trip to Chicago. His phone buzzed a text from Tom. "Just saw Melissa arrive at Mark's place. She's hanging all over him, man. The way they're looking at each other. I'm sorry, but you need to know. This isn't just an affair anymore. They're not even trying to be subtle." The message should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it felt like confirmation of what he'd known for months, but hadn't wanted to face. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of their relationship. But at least now, he could stop pretending there was anything left to save. Jason sank onto the couch, spreading the proof of her betrayal across the coffee table. The Christmas tree they'd decorated together just last weekend stood in the corner, its lights casting shadows that danced like mocking specters. An unopened present sat beneath it, a diamond necklace he'd bought weeks ago, before the doubts had crystallized into certainty that he should have seen it sooner. The signs had been there, growing more obvious with each passing week. But love had made him blind, and denial had kept him silent. Hours ticked by as he pieced together the timeline of her deception. The late-night calls had started in September, right after her promotion to senior account manager, a position that conveniently required more one-on-one meetings with Mark. The unexplained absences followed soon after. Lunch meetings that stretched into dinner. Emergency client situations that required immediate attention. Weekend workshops that he wasn't allowed to attend because they were employees only. By October, she'd started coming home with a smile he now recognized as guilt masked by false cheer. New clothes appeared in her closet, pieces she never wore around him. Her phone became a fortress, always face down, always locked, always clutched close to her chest when messages arrived. November brought the whispered conversations he'd pretended not to hear. The way she turned her phone away when messages arrived. The sudden work emergencies that pulled her away from dinner plans and family gatherings. The growing distance in their bed, where she'd turn away from his touch, claiming exhaustion or headaches, and now, December. Christmas Eve, and his wife was celebrating in another man's arms, wearing a dress he'd bought her, planning to announce their relationship to a room full of people who probably already knew. The grandfather clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the empty house. Christmas Day. Jason stood, his decision crystallizing with cold clarity. He'd given her chances. He'd ignored the signs, hoping he was wrong, praying she'd come to her senses. That in O'More, moving with renewed purpose, he headed to his office safe. The combination clicked into place. September 15th, 19, their wedding date. Inside, along with their important documents and emergency cash, sat a thick manila envelope. The private investigator's report had arrived 3 days ago. Jason hadn't wanted to believe it would come to this, but he needed to know. Needed proof that couldn't be explained away or dismissed as paranoia. The photos inside told a story that no amount of lies could cover up. Melissa and Mark at expensive restaurants, holding hands across candlelit tables. The two of them entering hotels in the middle of the day. Intimate embraces in Mark's car, in parking garages, in places they thought no one would see. The investigator had been thorough, providing dates, times, and locations for each encounter. Credit card statements corroborated the timeline. Cell phone records showed hundreds of text messages and calls exchanged during all hours. Hotel receipts matched perfectly with Melissa's out-of-town meetings. By dawn, he had assembled an irrefutable record of her infidelity. The stack of papers sat on his desk like a ticking bomb, waiting to explode their carefully constructed social facade. Every lie, every deception, every betrayal documented in merciless detail. The morning sun cast long shadows across the floor as Jason showered and dressed with mechanical precision. He chose his best suit, charcoal gray Armani, the one that made him look powerful. Dangerous. The cologne she'd always loved remained untouched on the bathroom counter, replaced by a newer, sharper scent that in their closet. He couldn't help but notice the gaps where her favorite pieces used to hang. She'd been moving things out gradually, he realized, preparing for this moment. Even if she hadn't consciously admitted it to herself, his phone buzzed again. Another text from Tom. Party's still going. They're planning some big announcement tonight. Word is they're going to come clean about their relationship. You need to end this, brother. End it on your terms. Jason's reflection stared back at him from the bathroom mirror. The man he saw looked older, harder, but also stronger. The weakness of denial had been burned away, replaced by a cold determination that straightened his spine and hardened his jaw. Melissa had wanted freedom. She was about to get it along with the consequences of her choices. The evidence went into a sleek leather briefcase, each page carefully arranged for maximum impact. His wedding ring came off next, the platinum band that had represented their vows now feeling like a shackle. He placed it deliberately on her pillow, a final message that needed no words outside. Snow continued to fall, covering the world in deceptive purity. Jason started his car, the engine's rumble matching the thunder in his heart. The time for patience was over. The time for understanding had passed. Tonight, at Mark's party, everything would change. His wife had made her choice. Now it was his turn. The snow had started falling again as Jason pulled up to Mark's mansion, the expensive home's a long Riverside Drive glowing with Christmas lights and holiday decorations. His leather briefcase sat heavy on the passenger seat, filled with evidence of their betrayal. Music and laughter spilled from the three-story brownstone, its windows blazing with warm light that failed to touch the ice in his heart. Tom waited by his police cruiser across the street, steam rising from 2 cups of coffee in his hands. His detective's instincts had prompted him to arrive early, scanning the arriving guests and taking stock of the situation. Half the company's here, Tom reported, handing Jason a coffee. Board members, executives, department heads. Mark's really putting on a show. Perfect. Jason's smile held no warmth. The bigger the audience, the better. Security's checking invitations at the door, Tom warned, pulling an envelope from his coat. But I grabbed this from Mark's assistant's desk. She wasn't happy with how he's been treating her lately. Jason examined the cream-colored invitation, noting the gold embossing. A Christmas Eve celebration, he read aloud. Please join us for an evening of joy and special announcements. His fist crushed the paper. Joy, right? The security guard barely glanced at his crumpled invitation, too busy dealing with a group of laughing executives. Inside, the warmth hit Jason like a physical force, carrying the sense of expensive catering and holiday spices. The foyer opened into a massive living room, transformed for the party with twinkling lights and elaborate decorations. A towering Christmas tree dominated one corner, dripping with ornaments that probably cost more than some people's monthly salary. Conversations hummed around him, snippets reaching his ears that confirmed what he already knew. Can't believe Mark and Melissa. Right under her husband's nose. Wonder when they'll announce it officially. Jason's grip tightened on his briefcase. A waiter passed with champagne, and he grabbed a glass. Not to drink, but to have something to occupy his hands. Then he saw them. Melissa stood near the tree, radiant in that black dress he now knew Mark had bought her. Her blonde hair caught the light, and her laugh carried across the room as she touched Mark's arm. They looked like the perfect couple, surrounded by admiring colleagues who either didn't know or didn't care that they were watching the destruction of a marriage. Rebecca, Mark's assistant, appeared at Jason's elbow. She looked nervous but determined. "You need to know something else," she whispered. "The offshore accounts? He's been moving money all week. Millions. And he booked a one-way flight to Barbados for tomorrow." "Just one ticket?" Jason asked. Rebecca nodded. "Melissa doesn't know. He's planning to leave her behind to take the fall." Davidson swore under his breath. "We need to alert the authorities." "Already done," Jason assured him. "But first, let them make their announcement. Let everyone see exactly who they really are." Across the room, other executives were starting to notice his presence. Angela Chun, head of marketing, touched Melissa's arm and whispered something. Melissa's head snapped up, her face going pale as she spotted Jason. Mark was still holding court near the Christmas tree, bragging about the company's record profits. Profits that Jason now knew were inflated by fraudulent accounts and stolen money. The Peterson merger alone, Mark was saying, brought in $30 million in new revenue. "The merger that never happened," Jason said loudly, stepping forward. "Tell them about the real numbers, Mark. Tell them where that money really went." The room fell silent. Every head turned toward the confrontation. Mark's confident smile flickered but held. "Jason," he said smoothly, "didn't expect to see you here. Office parties aren't usually your scene." "Neither is fraud," Jason replied, "or adultery. But you seem to excel at both." Melissa stepped between them, her voice tight with forced calm. "Jason, don't do this. Not here." "Why not here?" He gestured to the crowd. "Isn't this what you wanted? An audience? A chance to show everyone your perfect new life." "You're drunk," she accused, but her voice trembled. "I'm sober," Jason corrected, completely clear-headed. "Unlike the night you told me you were working late when you were really at the plaza with him. Room 1507, wasn't it?" Mark's face darkened. "You need to leave. Now." "Make me?" Jason set down his briefcase. "Show everyone how tough you are. Like you showed your wife before she filed that domestic violence complaint." A gasp went through the crowd. Mark's expression turned ugly. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snarled. "Don't I?" Jason turned to the gathering crowd. "Asked his wife about the night," she confronted him. "Ask her about the bruises, the broken furniture, the police report." "Stop it," Melissa pleaded, but Jason wasn't finished. "Tell them about the money, Mark. The fake accounts. The millions you've stolen. Tell Melissa about your flight to Barbados tomorrow. The one she doesn't know about." Melissa's head snapped toward Mark. "What flight?" "He's lying," Mark said quickly, but his eyes darted toward his office where his passport and tickets waited. "Am I?" Jason opened his briefcase. "Show them the evidence, Tom." Tom stepped forward with his laptop, connecting it to the large TV screen. Bank statements, transfer records, and surveillance photos filled the display. $500,000 in the Cayman account, Tom announced. Another $1 million in Switzerland. Wire transfers to Barbados scheduled for tomorrow morning. That's not possible," Melissa stammered. "Mark said those accounts were for our future." "Your future." Jason laughed harshly. The only future he planned was his own. One ticket, Melissa. One passport. One escape route. Mark's composure cracked. He lunged for Jason with a roar of rage, but Jason was ready. The fight that followed was brief, but brutal. As Jason moved through the crowded room, snippets of conversation confirmed what he already knew. Their affair had been an open secret, whispered about at water coolers and behind closed doors. I saw them at Le Bernardin last week, a junior executive muttered to his colleague. 3-hour business lunch with plenty of champagne. The Chicago conference, another added. They barely attended any sessions. Always disappeared together. Linda from accounting caught his eye across the room, her face full of sympathy. She'd been the first to warn him months ago. The expense reports didn't add up, she'd told him then. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, all approved by Mark personally. Now she gave him a slight nod. Understanding what was about to happen, Richard Davidson, the board chairman, intercepted Jason before he reached Mark and Melissa. "We need to talk," he said in a low voice, steering Jason toward a quiet corner. "About the fraud?" Jason asked calmly. Davidson's eyes widened. "How much do you know?" "Everything." Jason opened his briefcase slightly, showing the files inside. Every fake account, every stolen dollar, every falsified report. "My God." Davidson glanced at the documents. "The Morrison account? Shell company. Money laundered through offshore accounts. Johnson Holdings? Doesn't exist. Cover for personal expenses and cash transfers." Davidson's face hardened. "Show me." Jason pulled out key documents, letting the board chairman scan them quickly. Davidson's face grew progressively darker. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. "The annual audit is next week." "This would have destroyed the company," Jason finished. "That was probably the plan. Clean out the accounts and disappear." Mark spotted him first, his confident smile faltering for just a moment before he recovered. He whispered something to Melissa, whose head snapped up. The color drained from her face as she saw Jason standing there. "Well," Mark said loudly, clearly deciding to brazen it out. "Look who crashed our party. Didn't think office gatherings were your thing, Jason." The room fell silent, attention shifting to the unfolding drama. Jason moved forward with deliberate steps, each one echoing in the sudden quiet. "Crashed?" His voice carried easily through the room. "Interesting choice of words, Mark. Kind of like how you crashed my marriage." Melissa stepped forward, her voice tight with forced calm. "Jason, don't do this." "Not here. Not here." He laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "You mean not in front of all these people who've been watching you two make fools of yourselves? Not in front of the colleagues you've been lying to?" Mark's face darkened. "You need to leave. Now." "Or what?" Jason set his untouched champagne down with precise control. "You'll throw me out? Like you threw your wife out when she confronted you about other affairs." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mark's jaw clenched visibly. "I don't know what you think you know," Mark started, but Jason cut him off, opening his briefcase. "I know everything." He pulled out a thick folder. "Every hotel receipt, every secret meeting, every dollar you've stolen from the company to fund your little romance." "You're drunk," Melissa snapped, but her voice trembled. "You're making a scene over nothing." "Nothing." Jason's voice rose. "Is that what you call 5 years of marriage? Nothing?" He turned to address the crowd. "Did she tell you all how she spent our anniversary? While I waited at Le Cirque with flowers and a gift, she was with him at the plaza. Room 1507. Charged to the company account, of course." Mark stepped forward, his face flushing with rage. "That's enough." "No, it's not nearly enough." Jason pulled out photos, letting them scatter across a nearby table. "Look familiar, Mark? You two weren't as careful as you thought, especially with the company finances." People began picking up the photos, gasps and whispers spreading through the room. Melissa's face had gone from pale to ashen. "Jason, please," she whispered. "We can talk about this privately. Like you talked to me about it?" He met her eyes. "Like you talked to me last night when I gave you one last chance? What were your words again?" "I'm a free woman. I can do whatever I want." Mark's hand shot out, grabbing Jason's arm. "I said that's enough." The room exploded into motion. Jason moved with the fluid precision of someone who'd played this moment out in his mind 1,000 times. His fist connected with Mark's jaw, sending him stumbling backward into an expensive vase that shattered on impact. Women screamed. Men shouted. But Jason remained focused on Mark, who was wiping blood from his split lip. "Get up," Jason said coldly. "Show everyone how tough you are." Like you showed your wife before she filed that domestic violence complaint. Mark lunged with a roar of rage, swinging wildly. Jason stepped aside, letting Mark's momentum carry him past before delivering a devastating combination right to the ribs, left to the kidney, finishing with an uppercut that sent Mark crashing into the Christmas tree, ornaments shattered as the tree toppled. A final note of destruction in the ruined party. Mark lay groaning among the broken decorations, all his arrogance replaced by pain and humiliation. "The police are on their way," Tom announced from the doorway, his badge visible now. Along with some FBI agents very interested in corporate fraud. "Fraud?" someone in the crowd asked. "Show them," Jason ordered. Tom connected his laptop to the large TV mounted on the wall. Spreadsheets and bank statements filled the screen, damning evidence of years of theft and deception. $500,000, Jason announced to the stunned room, funneled through fake client accounts. Luxury hotels, expensive gifts, offshore accounts, all paid for with company money. Richard Davidson, head of the board's finance committee, stepped forward. "Mark, is this true?" "It's all lies." Mark struggled to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. "He's making it up, like you made up those client meetings?" Jason pulled out more documents. "Or those business trips? Tell them about the shell companies, Mark. Tell them where the money really went." Melissa stood frozen, her perfect dress smudged, her carefully styled hair disheveled. "Mark?" Her voice shook. "What is he talking about?" "Baby, don't listen to him," Mark pleaded. "Everything I did was for us. Was it for you when you did the same thing at your last 3 companies?" Jason asked coldly. "When you ruined other women's lives? Tell her about Jessica and Linda and Marie, Mark. Tell her what happened to them after you were done using them." The color drained from Mark's face. Melissa took a step back, realization dawning in her eyes. "Other women," she whispered. "Other victims," Tom corrected, pulling up more files on the screen. "Same pattern at every company. Seduce a key employee, use them to access financial records, steal everything, then disappear. You weren't special, Melissa. You were just the latest target." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Red and blue lights began flashing through the windows. The perfect Christmas party had become a crime scene. "Jason," Melissa tried one last time, reaching for him. "I didn't know. We can fix this." He stepped back from her touch. "Fix what? Our marriage? Your lover's criminal charges? Your own complicity in financial fraud? Some things can't be fixed, Melissa. Some choices can't be taken back." Police officers entered, led by Tom, who began directing them. Federal agents followed, moving quickly to secure Mark and gather evidence. "Mr. Williams," an officer began reading his rights. "You're under arrest for suspicion of fraud, embezzlement, and domestic violence. You've ruined everything." Melissa sobbed, mascara streaking her cheeks. "No," Jason corrected her. "You ruined everything. Every lie, every secret meeting, every night you came home and looked me in the eye while betraying our marriage. Those were your choices." He turned to leave, his work done. The truth was out, justice was in motion, and his marriage was officially over. "Jason, wait." Melissa's voice cracked with desperation. "Where are you going?" He paused at the door, looking back at the wreckage of the party, of his marriage, of the lies she and Mark had built together. In the end, it had all come crashing down like that fallen Christmas tree, leaving nothing but broken pieces and bitter truths. "I'm going home," he said simply. "Merry Christmas, Melissa. I hope he was worth it." Outside, the snow wrapped the world in deceptive purity. Jason walked to his car, each step taking him further from the chaos behind him. His wedding ring was gone, his marriage was over, but his conscience was clear. He had faced the betrayal head-on and emerged stronger. Tom fell in a step beside him. "That was one hell of a Christmas party." "Sure was." Jason smiled grimly. "Think they'll be talking about this one for a while?" As Jason drove away from Mark's mansion, he could see the scene in his rearview mirror. Police cars, shock party guests spilling onto the street, the ruins of what was supposed to be Mark and Melissa's triumph. But he didn't slow down or look back again. They had made their choices. Now they could live with the consequences. The morning after the Christmas party dawned cold and bright, sunlight glinting off fresh snow that covered the chaos of the previous night. Jason sat in his home office, A cup of untouched coffee growing cold as headlines screamed across his laptop screen. Corporate scandal rocks industry. Executive arrested at Christmas party. Multi-million-dollar fraud scheme exposed. Love affair leads to criminal investigation. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. News outlets, colleagues, distant relatives, everyone wanted details about the spectacular downfall of Mark Williams and his criminal enterprise. Jason ignored them all, focusing instead on the steady stream of official updates from investigators. The Tom's police cruiser pulled into the driveway at 8 a.m., snow crunching under its tires. His friend wasn't alone. FBI agent Cooper and two other federal agents followed in a black SUV. Some morning after, Tom said, entering with coffee and files. Sleep at all? Too much happening. Jason gestured to his laptop. Mark's face is on every financial news site from here to Singapore. Wait till they hear what we found overnight. Cooper strode in, his suit wrinkled from hours of investigation. Your corporate fraud just became international money laundering. Jason leaned forward. Explain. Mark's network wasn't just stealing from companies. Cooper spread files across the desk. They were selling corporate secrets to overseas competitors. Industrial espionage, insider trading, the works. We found encrypted communications, one of Cooper's agents added. Coded messages to firms in China, Russia, even supposed allies. Your company's trade secrets were being auctioned to the highest bidders. Tom whistled low. No wonder the money trail was so complex. That's not all. Cooper pulled out more documents. Remember those shell companies in the Caymans? Fronts for a larger operation. Mark was middle management in a global criminal enterprise. The doorbell rang again. This time, it was Richard Davidson from the board, accompanied by the company's entire legal team and PR department. Jason. Davidson looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. We need damage control. Major clients are threatening to pull out. How bad? Stocks down 30% in pre-market trading, the PR director, Angela Chun, reported. Every business news channel is running the story. Social media's exploding with leaked footage from the party. Show him, Davidson ordered. Angela pulled up videos on her tablet. Multiple angles of the confrontation, the fight, Mark being led away in handcuffs. Someone had even captured Melissa's breakdown when she learned of Mark's plan to abandon her. Millions of views already, Angela said. We're trending worldwide. What's our exposure? Jason asked Davidson. Initial estimate? Over 50 million in fraudulent transactions. But the data breach? Davidson's voice cracked. We don't know how many corporate secrets were compromised. Before anyone could respond, Jason's secure line rang, the one reserved for law enforcement contacts. Cooper answered, putting it on speaker. Sir, a voice reported, Mark Williams is requesting a deal. Says he has information about operations in 12 countries, going back 5 years. And Melissa? Jason couldn't help asking. Been in interviews since 3 a.m. Full cooperation. She. The voice hesitated. She attempted self-harm when shown evidence of Mark's previous victims. Medical has her under observation. The news hit harder than Jason expected. Despite everything, part of him still cared what happened to the woman he'd married. Previous victims? Tom caught the phrase. Cooper nodded grimly. Mark's done this before. 3 other companies, 3 other women. All followed the same pattern. Seduce a key employee, use them to access sensitive data, steal everything, then vanish. What happened to the women? Davidson asked. Prison sentences. Bankruptcy. 1 suicide. Cooper's voice was hard. Mark had it down to a science. We found identical love letters. Same phrases, same promises. He even took them to the same restaurants, bought them the same gifts. Jason remembered the black dress Melissa had worn to the party. Let me guess. Mark bought his other girlfriends the same dress? From the same designer. Same jewelry, too. Cooper pulled out photos. Like a uniform for his marks. The doorbell rang yet again. This time it was Rebecca, Mark's former assistant, clutching a laptop and looking terrified. I found something, she blurted. Hidden files. The next targets. Everyone crowded around as she opened the laptop. Lists of companies, employee profiles, detailed plans for future operations. Mark's playbook laid bare. He had it all mapped out. Rebecca's voice shook. Which companies to hit, which employees to target. There are psychological profiles, personal information, details about marriages with problems. That's how he picked Melissa. Jason asked quietly. Rebecca nodded. He had a whole file on her. Notes about your work hours, your travel schedule. He planned everything. Son of a bitch, Tom muttered. The morning devolved into a blur of meetings, calls, and revelations. Every hour brought new discoveries about the scope of Mark's operation. At 18 noon, Cooper's team got a breakthrough. Offshore accounts, an agent reported. Not just the ones we knew about. Hundreds of millions hidden in banks across Europe and Asia. How do we miss this? Davidson demanded. Because half the accounts are in your executives' names, Cooper replied. Mark forged signatures, created fake documentation. If he got caught, he planned to implicate others. Including me? Jason asked. $5 million in an account with your name on it. Cooper showed him the documents. Opened 3 months ago. Signatures forged, but it would have been enough to cast doubt. The revelation sparked another round of crisis meetings. PR teams drafted statements. Lawyers planned defenses. Security experts began system-wide audits. Through it all, Jason's phone kept buzzing with updates about Melissa. Full confession, read one message from the DA's office. Detailed testimony about Mark's methods. How he groomed her, manipulated her, used her position. Suicide watch, another reported. Severe trauma response to learning about other victims. Requesting witness protection, a third revealed. Claims Mark's associates made threats. At 3 p.m., Davidson called an emergency board meeting via secure video link. We need to get ahead of this, he announced to grim-faced executives. Jason, what's your recommendation? Jason laid out his strategy. Full disclosure. Complete transparency. Show how we caught the fraud, help take down an international criminal network. Make the company the hero of this story, not the victim. The stock price, someone objected. We'll recover, Jason cut them off. But only if we handle this right. Hide anything, try to minimize it, and we'll look complicit. The debate raged for hours. Finally, the board agreed. Jason's plan would be implemented immediately. As evening approached, Cooper returned with more files. Mark's singing like a bird, he reported. Naming names, providing account details. Says he can bring down bigger players. In exchange for what? Reduced sentence. Witness protection. Cooper's laugh was bitter. Claims he was just following orders. Wants to help clean up the industry. Like hell, Tom growled that Jason's phone buzzed again, a message from Melissa's lawyer. Client wishes to return all gifts, including wedding ring. Suggests selling them to help other victims of fraud. It was a gesture, at least. More than he'd expected. As darkness fell. The meetings finally ended. Davidson lingered behind. The London office needs a new general counsel, he said carefully. Someone who understands corporate crime, who's proven they can handle a crisis. Jason understood the offer. A fresh start, away from the scandal and memories. When would you need an answer? Take some time, Davidson replied. But not too long. We need to show stability, continuity. After everyone left, Tom stayed to help sort through the mountains of evidence. Hell of a Christmas, he remarked. Hell of a year, Jason corrected. You know, Tom said carefully, Melissa's lawyer called me. Says she wants to meet, explain everything. No, Jason's voice was firm. She made her choices. She was manipulated. She was a willing participant. Jason cut him off. Mark may have chosen her, groomed her, but every lie she told me was her choice. Every night, she came home and looked me in the eye while betraying our marriage. That was her choice. Tom nodded slowly. What about London? Jason walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered yard. Christmas lights still twinkled on neighboring houses, a reminder of how much had changed in 24 hours. I think it's time, he said finally. Fresh start. New year, new life. Running away? No. Jason turned back. Moving forward. Everything here is tainted now. Every room, every street, every memory. Time to write a new chapter. The next few days would bring more revelations, more drama, more media frenzy. Mark's criminal network would unravel, exposing corruption across multiple industries. Melissa would plead guilty. trading testimony for a lighter sentence. The company would recover stronger for having exposed the fraud, but for Jason, none of that mattered now. His path was clear. His phone buzzed one final time. That night, a text from Cooper. Just heard Mark's other victims want to meet you. So you've given them closure, justice. Want to thank you. Jason smiled slightly. Some good had come from all this pain. Tom headed for the door. Need anything else? No. Jason's voice was firm. For the first time in months, I know exactly what I need to do. After his friend left, Jason sat at his desk and began typing his acceptance letter for the London position. Each word felt like another step away from the pain, the lies, the betrayal. Melissa had chosen her path. Mark had chosen his. Both paths led to prison cells and ruined lives. Jason chose something different. Not forgiveness, never that, but freedom. Freedom from lies, from manipulation, from the weight of a marriage built on deception. The next morning's headlines would scream about justice served, about corporate criminals brought low, about the unraveling of a sophisticated fraud scheme. But for Jason, the real story was simpler. He had faced betrayal with strength. He had exposed the truth without flinching, that he had lost a marriage but kept his integrity. And now, as Christmas Day faded into history, he looked forward to the new year with clear eyes and a stronger heart. They had all made their choices that he could live with his.